Definitely not an ally of Russia. I mean, this friends without limits. That was BS. But I think China, what they care about the most is maintaining status quo, maintaining access to cheap Russian oil and gas.
Putin wanted to intimidate Poland. That's why he sent 1,000 Russian troops to Belarus to take part in an exercise practicing an invasion of the Polish nation. But now it seems Putin's intimidation tactics are backfiring horrendously. Poland put down its own 40,000 troops along the Belarusian border, and on top of that, they shut down the border crossings that connected China, Russia, and Belarus to Europe. Now Belarus is freaking out, China is freaking out, and of course, Russia is feeling the pinch. So today, let's go over exactly what Russia was trying to do, why it backfired, and why China is extremely pissed off because of this.
Barbed wire rolled out as Poland closes 2 of the remaining border crossings with Belarus. Warsaw says it's closing the border until further notice, saying Russian and Belarusian military drills are to blame.
Zamknęliśmy ruch na granicy polsko-białoruskiej.
We closed traffic on the Polish-Belarusian border. This is due to the Zapad maneuvers. These maneuvers are aimed squarely at Poland and the European Union. These maneuvers are practicing aggressive warfare scenarios against our country.
So it all started with this Russian-Belarusian military exercise that took place right at the Polish border. It was called Zapad 2025, which literally translates to West 2025. Now, the last time this exercise actually happened was back in 2021, when Russia used the exercise as an excuse to gather 200,000 Russian military personnel right at the Ukrainian border. Now, with benefit of hindsight, we know Russia also used the exercise as a stress test for the full-scale Ukrainian invasion that came just a few months after the 2021 exercise. But just to contrast that 2021 exercise with the one Russia is doing right now, we can see that the Russian military is suffering tremendously. Because last time they had 200,000 Russian military personnel taking part, while this time they had few thousands, and some estimates actually say as low as just 1,000 Russian troops were there alongside 7,000 Belarusian troops. It just goes to show you the manpower shortages that Russia is facing after its invasion of Ukraine. Now, even with such a small force, Poland was not happy with Russia carrying out this exercise right at its border. So they announced a week in advance of the exercise that Poland will be closing all the border crossings until the exercise is over. That was the initial plan. The exercise was scheduled for September 12th to September 16th, and Poland closed its borders on September 9th. This was all public knowledge even before the exercise took place. But what made the situation worse was the Russian drone attack against Polish citizens. You see, on September 10th, just one day after Poland closed its borders, and 2 days before this Zapad exercise was supposed to begin, 19 Russian drones breached Polish airspace in an unprecedented overnight attack on NATO. This was first time NATO jets were used to take down Russian drones to protect Polish citizens. In response, Poland activated NATO's Article 4. This allows member states to request consultations when they believe their security is under threat. Now, all the while this was happening, panic was spreading all across the Belarusian border. Over 1,500 vehicles were stuck trying to cross into Poland when borders were closed off. And after the Russian drone attack, Polish authorities actually said the border crossings will be closed indefinitely, and they would only reopen once authorities were 100% certain that there was no threat coming from the east. Now, this is where things get interesting, because China is actually really dependent on this border crossing that connects China, Russia, Belarus to Europe. But before we get to how China is involved, let's quickly go over how Russia is responding to Poland's actions. Let's listen from Russian spokesperson Dmitry Medvedev.
Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has described European concerns about these drills as emotional overload. Some might see that brushing aside of those concerns as an indication that they are in fact valid.
Well, Peskov repeatedly said that the drills were not aimed at any particular country and then other countries have nothing to worry. However, Europe and especially here Baltic states have every right to be concerned. Because in past, Russia often used military drills as a preparation for real military aggression, like full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 followed the exercises in 2021. So NATO's eastern flank members Poland, Lithuania and Latvia are on high alert these days, especially after the drone incident. Following this, Poland actually closed its border with Belarus. Poland, Latvia and Lithuania also closed part of their airspace. And all these countries are conducting military drills these days as well, with special attention to Suwałki Corridor. It's a stretch of land that connects Baltic states to the rest of Europe, and it's said to be one of the most vulnerable parts of NATO's eastern flank.
Now let's talk about China. I'm sure you guys remember BRI, China's Belt and Road Initiative. Well, guess what? Belarus is actually one of the more important hubs in Xi Jinping's plan to take over the world. Rail traffic passes through Belarus that connects Chinese factories to consumers in Europe, and the same traffic from Belarus passes into Poland. In fact, 90% of all rail goods that move from China to Europe actually go through this railway line. Now, unfortunately for China, the Russian intimidation tactics are backfiring and hurting the Chinese economy. Because since Poland has shut down its borders, the Chinese goods are stuck in Belarus, where people don't really have the money to afford even the cheap Chinese goods. I guess that's what happens when you're living under a dictatorship. Now, this is not some small issue for China because according to last year's data that was made public, roughly $29 billion of trade happened through this border crossing that Poland has now closed indefinitely. That's why we saw Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi quickly go to Poland to figure out some way to reopen it as soon as possible.
Polish officials admitted the disruption would cause losses, but argued that security came first. For Beijing, the timing was particularly difficult. The China-Europe Railway Express is the flagship project linking Chinese factories to European consumers. It is faster than shipping by sea and cheaper than sending goods by air. China sees Poland as a crucial partner in this system. So, when Warsaw closed its border, Beijing made its displeasure clear. Chinese diplomats argue that the trains benefit both sides. Europe receives fast, affordable goods, while Chinese exporters gain access to one of the world's largest markets. Polish leaders see it differently. They argue that borders are part of national defense.